Why is timing so incredibly important in science? Hello, YouTube. This is Dr. Dave Maslick talking to you about reciprocity.com, the sharing economy software, sharing economy proofreading software that I'm trying to build. And I wanted to actually talk about things where I can nerd out. I'm calling this Nerd Out Wednesday. I've had some previous videos on this. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is the issue of timing with your variables. So if you look at what I talked about in the past, I talked about the dependent variable. This is the thing that you're trying to explain, the independent variable thing that you think is leading to the dependent variable. And then the importance of theory in explaining this relationship. Well, there's one more incredibly important thing. Actually, there's a couple more incredibly important things I'll talk about in other videos, but this one I wanted to talk about the issue of timing. You have to have the independent variable happen before the dependent variable. And the reason is you want to understand if the independent variable actually has any sort of causal link to the dependent variable. That's so important. So the thing that you're trying to explain, that the relationship that you're trying to explain, that the independent variable, the thing that you think is actually changing the dependent variable, is occurring before the dependent variable. And so that's thinking about, let's think about the effect of smoking and cancer, right? That there's pretty strong proof at this moment, quote unquote proof. And the reason I use quotes around proof is that it's really, really hard to have any sort of proof over something. It's one thing that you'd learn if you become a scientist, or you go and if you do graduate studies even, you'll begin to understand that we can't prove anything in the world, but we can have very, very strong causal understanding, or we can have a strong understanding that something is happening. And so you can't necessarily say prove, but you can say that there is some pretty strong causal, or there is some very strong likelihood that that particular phenomenon is occurring. So if you think of smoking and cancer, that if you smoke, for example, at the early age, that you're going to lead to, or you're going to have a high likelihood of cancer. We can't necessarily prove that, particularly within an individual. It's really hard to do. In fact, it's impossible. The only way we could do that in aggregate, but we can't have, if we're thinking about the sort of causal structure of this, you can't have that you get cancer first and then you smoke. That doesn't make any sense. That clearly does not make any sense. You have to have the independent variable that you're smoking, or smoking rates are leading to some form of cancer in the future, right? So that's the only way that it makes sense. So this issue of timing is important. So if you are a scientist, if you are doing strategy work that I'm currently in, some of you might be, you want to think about maybe lagging, what's called lagging your independent variables. If you're doing this, you might want to think about how you can exploit this timing issue to get better causal understanding in some way. It's just very important to think about this timing issue. What a lot of people do, and there's been a lot of flack in the scientific community in the last probably 20 years. What we used to do is what we used to do is do, now I lost my train of thought. What we used to do is sort of survey research on people. There's still a lot of people that do that, but it is getting less popular simply because when you send out a survey to a bunch of individuals at the same time, you are gathering both the independent variable and the dependent variable, and it's really difficult to tease apart any sort of causal effects. You often just get very what's called correlation effects, and if it's just correlational effects, there's so many more reasons why that could happen, and we can't necessarily rule out many of those explanations. So if we have some sort of timing or lag structure between the two different variables, it's much more easier to understand that or to rule out some of these alternative explanations of why they might be occurring at the same time, so have contemporaneous problems at the same time. So if you like these videos and you want to help out, make sure that you do subscribe to the YouTube channel. That everything that every time you subscribe, that definitely helps out. If you want to help out with the reciprocity project, so the E is spelled with a 3. It's a sharing economy proofreading application that I am building. Just go onto the website, and I promised that I would tell you why I'm doing that. I'm actually trying to understand. There's a problem that we have actually in organizational theory, organizational sciences. We can't necessarily get any sort of causal proof, or there goes that word again. We can't get a good understanding. We can't rule out a lot of explanations because most of us actually just look at longitudinal data that we've collected over long term, and we can't get any sort of we can't do a lot of manipulations in organizations. So one way that we can do that is through something like this software platform, and that's why I'm trying to build it, is because we can start getting some much better causal understanding of how the world works, in particular within organizations, and how people actually organize. So that's why I'm building this software. One of the major reasons why I'm building this software. There's a bunch of other reasons. You could check out the previous videos of what that's about. So anyways, thank you so much and have a good day. Take care. Bye.